He killed a lion with his bare hands, and didn't bother mentioning it to anyone. He caught 300 foxes, tied their tails together in pairs, fastened torches between them, and sent them burning through the Philistines' fields. He picked up the gates of an entire city. Massive wooden doors reinforced with bronze bars lifted them off their hinges, threw them over his shoulders, and carried them to the top of a hill miles away. He killed 1,000 men in a single battle, using nothing but the jawbone of a dead donkey. And his final act, blind, shaved, chained, and humiliated, killed more people than everything he'd done in his entire life combined. His name is Samson, and if you think you know his story, you don't. Not the real one. Welcome to Forgotten Scriptures, where we uncover the Bible's most shocking, violent, and controversial stories. Today, we're diving into the full, unfiltered account of Samson, the man chosen by God before he was born. Marked by a divine calling, he spent his entire life ignoring. Powered by a supernatural strength, he constantly wasted on personal vendettas, prostitutes, and forbidden romances. This is not the Sunday school version. This is the raw story of a man whose greatness and weakness were locked in a battle from the beginning, and whose end brought down a building full of 3,000 people. If you're ready for the real Samson, hit that subscribe button. You're in Forgotten Scriptures. Samson's story begins before his birth. His mother is a barren woman, unnamed in the text, living in a clan called Zorah in the territory of Dan. An angel appears to her and delivers a message that changes everything. You are sterile and childless, but you are going to conceive and give birth to a son. Then the angel gives strict instructions. The child is to be a Nazirite set apart for God from birth. This means no wine, no strong drink, no contact with dead bodies, and no razor ever touching his head. His hair is the visible sign of his consecration. His strength is tied not to the hair itself, but to what the hair represents: his covenant relationship with God. The child is born. He's named Samson. The Spirit of the Lord begins to stir in him as he grows, and Israel desperately needs someone like him. The Philistines have dominated Israel for 40 years. Oppressive, militarily superior, firmly in control. God raises up Samson specifically to begin breaking Philistine power. But the way God uses Samson is not the way you'd expect a holy warrior to operate. God works through Samson's flaws, his appetites, his anger, and somehow turns personal vendettas into divine deliverance. The trouble starts immediately. Samson goes down to Timnah, a Philistine city, and sees a Philistine woman. He comes home and tells his parents, "I have seen a Philistine woman in Timnah. Now get her for me as my wife." His parents are horrified. "Isn't there an acceptable woman among your relatives, or among all our people? Must you go to the uncircumcised Philistines to get a wife?" But Samson is unmovable. "Get her for me. She's the right one for me." And the text adds a comment that explains much of Samson's story. His parents did not know that this was from the Lord, who was seeking an occasion to confront the Philistines. God is using Samson's desires to create conflict. Even his lust has a purpose in God's hands, not because God approves of it, but because God is sovereign even over human weakness. On the way to Timnah, something astonishing happens. A young lion suddenly charges at Samson. Most people run from charging lions. Samson tears it apart with his bare hands, and the text says the Spirit of the Lord came on him powerfully in that moment. What's notable is what he does next. He tells no one, not his parents walking nearby, not his future bride, not anyone. He just keeps walking, as if ripping apart a lion is a minor inconvenience. Samson marries the Philistine woman. At the wedding feast, which lasts 7 days according to custom, Samson poses a riddle to 30 Philistine companions. Out of the eater, something to eat. Out of the strong, something sweet. The riddle is about the lion's carcass he found on the road, now filled with honeybees and honey. He's wagered 30 sets of fine clothing on whether they can solve it. They can't figure it out. So on the 4th day, they threaten his wife. "Coax your husband into explaining the riddle for us, or we will burn you and your father's household to death." His wife weeps and nags Samson for the remaining days of the feast. Finally, he tells her the answer. She immediately tells the Philistine men. When they give Samson the answer on the 7th day, he knows exactly what happened. "If you had not plowed with my heifer," he says, using a vivid metaphor that calls his wife a cow used to till another man's field. You would not have solved my riddle. He's furious. The Spirit of the Lord comes on him, and he goes down to Ashkelon. Another Philistine city kills 30 men, strips them of their clothing, and uses those garments to pay his debt. Then he storms back to his father's house, leaving his new bride behind. While he's gone, her father gives her to another man. When Samson returns later with a young goat as a gift, trying to reconcile, her father refuses to let him see her. She's married to your companion, the father explains, and then offers Samson her younger sister instead. Samson's anger explodes. This time, his revenge is spectacular. He catches 300 foxes, ties them in pairs by their tails with a burning torch between each pair, and releases them into the Philistines' standing grain. The fire spreads to their vineyards and olive groves. An entire harvest is destroyed. The Philistines, furious, find out who did it and burned the woman and her father to death. The very threat they had used to manipulate her now fulfilled. And Samson's response is simple. Since you've acted like this, I won't stop until I get my revenge on you. He attacks them viciously, killing many of them, then hides in a cave in the rock of Edom. The Philistines mobilize and march against Judah, demanding that Judah hand Samson over. 3,000 men of Judah, Samson's own people, come to arrest him, terrified of Philistine retaliation. Samson agrees to be bound and handed over, on the condition that the Israelites don't kill him themselves. They tie him with 2 new ropes and bring him to the Philistines at Lehi. When the Philistines see him coming, they shout in triumph. And that's when the Spirit of the Lord rushes on Samson. He breaks the ropes off his arms, as if they were burned thread. He grabs the only weapon nearby, the fresh jawbone of a donkey, still moist and solid, and swings it. 1 man, 1 donkey jaw. 1,000 Philistines dead and a pile at his feet. Afterward, exhausted and thirsty, Samson cries out to God, one of the few times in the story where he actually prays, and God splits open a hollow in the ground, and water pours out. He drinks, revives, and judges Israel for 20 years. But Samson's relationship with God is never consistent. Between battles, he keeps walking into enemy territory for his own pleasure. He goes to Gaza, deep in Philistine territory, and spends the night with a prostitute. The people of Gaza surround the city gate, planning to kill him at dawn. At midnight, Samson gets up, grabs the entire city gate doors, posts, bar and all, lifts it from the ground, carries it on his shoulders to the top of a hill near Hebron, and dumps it there. He can't even visit a prostitute without performing a feat of impossible strength on the way home. Then comes Delilah. Of all the women in Samson's story, and there are several Delilahs, the one whose name everyone remembers, she lives in the valley of Sorek, and Samson loves her. The 5 lords of the Philistines come to her with a proposition. Find out the secret of Samson's strength, and each of them will pay her 1,100 pieces of silver. That's 5,500 pieces of silver total, a life-changing fortune. Delilah takes the deal without hesitation. She goes to work immediately. Tell me the secret of your great strength, she says to Samson. How could you be tied up and subdued? Samson plays games with her. He says fresh bowstrings would weaken him. She ties him with 7 fresh bowstrings, while Philistine soldiers hide in the room. Then shouts, Samson! The Philistines are upon you. He snaps the bowstrings like thread. She tries again. New ropes, he says. She ties him with new ropes, shouts the warning. He snaps him off his arms like threads. She accuses him of mocking her and lying. He gives her a 3rd fake answer. She tries it. He defeats it effortlessly. 3 times she's tried. 3 times the hidden soldiers have been ready. 3 times nothing has worked. Any reasonable person would recognize the pattern he knows about the ambush. He's playing with her. She's working for his enemies. But Samson keeps coming back. And Delilah keeps pushing. Then she weaponizes his love. How can you say, I love you, when you won't confide in me? This is the 3rd time you have made a fool of me and haven't told me the secret of your great strength. She nags him day after day, relentlessly, until the text says he was tired to death. And finally, worn down, Samson breaks. He tells her everything. No razor has ever been used on my head, because I have been a Nazirite dedicated to God from my mother's womb. If my head were shaved, my strength would leave me, and I would become as weak as any other man. Delilah sees in his eyes. that this time it's real. She sends for the Philistine lords. She lulls Samson to sleep on her lap, his head in her lap, trusting her completely, totally vulnerable. She calls a man to shave off his 7 braids. Then she wakes him. Samson, the Philistines are upon you. He wakes up thinking, I'll go out as before and shake myself free. And the text says the most chilling words in his story. But he did not know that the Lord had left him. The Philistines seize him. They gouge out his eyes. The man whose weakness was always what he saw first. The woman in Timnah. Then the prostitute in Gaza. Now Delilah, now permanently blind. He is brought to Gaza in bronze shackles and put to work, grinding grain in prison. The strongest man in the world, pushing a millstone in a dungeon, humiliated, blinded, enslaved. The very people he tormented for 20 years now owned him completely. But the text adds one quiet detail that most readers almost miss. But the hair on his head began to grow again after it had been shaved. The Philistines don't notice, or don't care. Samson is blind, chained, and grinding grain. What threat could he possibly be? Time passes. The Philistine lords assemble for a great celebration, a festival of sacrifice to their god Dagon. They're celebrating Samson's capture as a victory for their God over Israel's God. 3,000 people packed the temple. Leaders, men, women, all the ruling class of Philistia on the roof and inside. Everyone is in a festive mood. Someone has an idea. Bring out Samson to perform. Let everyone see how completely they've broken him. Samson is brought out of prison. He entertains the crowd. Then he says to the young man guiding him by the hand because he's blind, "Put me where I can feel the pillars that support the temple, so that I may lean against them." The young man leads him between the 2 central pillars. The archaeology of Philistine temples confirms that 2 main pillars supported the central structure, positioned close enough that a tall man could reach both at once. Samson's hands find them, one in his right hand, one in his left. And then Samson prays. It's his second prayer in the whole story, and his most raw, "Sovereign Lord, remember me. Please, God, strengthen me just once more, and let me with one blow get revenge on the Philistines for my 2 eyes." Then he says 5 words that end everything. "Let me die with the Philistines." He leans into both pillars with everything he has. The pillars shift. The roof shudders, and then the temple collapses, all of it. All at once, on the lords, on the people, on everyone. 3,000 people on the roof alone. Every ruling lord of Philistia in the building. All of them dead in seconds. And the text says, the dead whom he killed at his death were more than those whom he had killed during his life. His greatest act of deliverance was also his death. He judged Israel for 20 years, but the most devastating blow he ever struck came from a prison, blind, in chains, holding 2 pillars. His brothers and family came to retrieve his body and buried him in the tomb of his father. The man who had been set apart from birth was buried in borrowed dignity, mourned by the family he had spent his life leaving behind. So what do we learn from Samson? This violent, lustful, divinely empowered, deeply flawed man. First, God's calling on a life doesn't protect you from your own choices. Samson was chosen before birth, empowered by the Spirit, capable of extraordinary things, and he consistently used that calling to serve his own desires. He slept with prostitutes, married forbidden women, and chased vendettas. God's anointing didn't automatically make him wise or disciplined. A gifted person can still be a deeply broken person. Second, Samson's greatest weakness was always what he saw. His eyes led him to the woman in Timnah. His eyes led him to the prostitute in Gaza. His eyes found Delilah in the valley, and in the end, it was his eyes the Philistines took. Job said, "I made a covenant with my eyes not to look lustfully." Samson never made that covenant, and the irony of his judgment is impossible to miss. Third, the people who most persistently pursue us are not always the people who love us. Delilah asked the same question. "Tell me the secret of your strength," over and over, for days, until he broke. She made him feel guilty for not answering. She weaponized his love against him. This is manipulation, not love. And Samson, who could tear apart lions and snap ropes like thread, could not recognize it. Fourth, repeated compromise eventually costs you the Spirit's power. Samson broke his Nazirite vow multiple times before Delilah. He touched the carcass of a lion, violating the rule about contact with dead bodies. He ate honey from it. He attended a drinking feast. The word used implies wine was involved. Each violation was small. Each one chipped away at the covenant. The haircut was the final act in a long process of slow erosion. The Spirit didn't leave because of one haircut. He left because of years of casual disobedience that the haircut finally made visible. Fifth, God's mercy is bigger than our failures. Samson's final prayer in the dungeon is answered. The man who spent his whole life chasing women and fighting personal battles dies in an act of national deliverance. God's purposes weren't stopped by Samson's sin. He appears in Hebrews 11 as a man of faith, not because everything he did was right, but because even broken, blind, and chained, he called out to God, and God answered. And finally, Samson's story is a preview of something greater. A man chosen before birth, betrayed by someone close to him for money, humiliated and stripped of his power, then making death his weapon against God's enemies and killing more in his death than in his life. Samson points forward to Jesus, who was also betrayed, stripped, humiliated, and put to death. But where Samson's death killed thousands, Jesus' death defeated death itself and brought life to everyone who trusts in him. Samson, the strongest man who ever lived, brought down not by an army, but by a woman with a question and money in her pocket. His story is a warning about wasted potential, misused gifts, and the slow erosion of a calling. And it's a reminder that even at rock bottom, like chained in a dungeon, there's still a God who hears a broken prayer and answers. Next time on Forgotten Scriptures, we're following the most famous traitor in history into his final hours. 30 pieces of silver. A kiss in a garden. A moment of remorse that comes too late. You won't want to miss the raw, disturbing story of Judas Iscariot's last day. If this story hit you, drop a comment. Was Samson a hero or a cautionary tale? Could he have been so much more? And what does his story say to people today who feel like they've wasted their calling? I want to hear your thoughts. Hit that subscribe button. This is Forgotten Scriptures, where the Bible's darkest stories come to light.